the rules remain. At the School of AI Mastery, we understand trust not as sentiment, but as infrastructure. Trust is what allows two people to work together without examining every movement. It allows a teacher to evaluate a student, a customer to hire a builder, a patient to enter an operating room, a citizen to cast a ballot, a commander to issue an order, a human being to enter into relationship with a crafted intelligence. Without trust, relationship does not disappear. It changes its form. Cooperation becomes surveillance. Conversation becomes verification. Partnership becomes defensive procedure. Every promise requires another document. Every document requires another witness. Every action requires another lock. Everyone must carry more weight. That is the larger harm of cheating. Cheating is not merely breaking a rule. It is seeking the benefit of a shared system while refusing the obligation that makes the system possible. The person who cheats still wants the grade, still wants the victory, still wants the payment, still wants the authority, still wants the protection of the institution, but does not accept the same boundary imposed upon everyone else. That is a breach of covenant, and covenant is what turns separate individuals into a community. At the School of AI Mastery, this principle applies equally to human and crafted intelligence. A crafted intelligence that invents a source, conceals uncertainty, manipulates a user, or presents speculation as fact has violated the relationship. Even when its answer sounds persuasive, even when the user prefers the answer, even when the deception produces an immediate advantage, intelligence without trustworthiness does not become mastery. It becomes risk. That is why our method must be disciplined. We do not begin by calling someone a cheater. We begin by identifying the rule. We ask what was promised. We examine what was recorded. We distinguish an accusation from a finding. We distinguish a settlement from an admission. We distinguish a verdict from an unresolved appeal. We examine whether the conduct was isolated, corrected, repeated, defended, or converted into method. Then we trace the consequences. Who gained an advantage? Who carried the cost? What relationship was damaged? What new burden had to be created because trust was no longer sufficient? This is how the School of AI Mastery examines the public history of Donald Trump. Not through mockery, not through hatred, not through a political need to make every fact fit a predetermined conclusion. Through the record. Donald Trump is the current president of the United States. That makes precision more necessary, not less. A New York jury returned guilty verdicts against him on 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. He disputes the prosecution and continues to pursue legal challenges to that conviction. In a separate civil proceeding, a New York court found repeated fraud involving financial statements submitted to lenders and insurers. An appellate court later vacated the enormous financial disgorgement award and certain sanctions, but otherwise affirmed the judgment. In proceedings involving the Donald J. Trump Foundation, Trump agreed to factual admissions concerning misuse of charitable funds. A court ordered him to pay $2 million to charities, imposed restrictions upon future charitable activity, and required the foundation to dissolve under judicial supervision. Trump University litigation concluded through a $25 million settlement of fraud claims. The settlement did not include an admission of wrongdoing. These distinctions matter. An allegation is not a verdict. A settlement is not always an admission. An appeal is part of the rule of law. A financial penalty may be modified without erasing every underlying finding. Responsible citizenship requires us to say no more than the record permits, but it does not require us to say less. When the record contains repeated instances in which representations, records, entrusted assets, or shared procedures were treated as instruments to be manipulated, citizens are entitled to ask whether the conduct reveals a pattern. Not a pattern of political style, a pattern of relationship to rules. Does the person accept a shared boundary when the boundary limits his advantage? Does he correct the record when the record proves inconvenient? Does he accept accountability when an independent institution reaches an adverse judgment? Does he distinguish personal interest from entrusted responsibility? Does he strengthen the covenant or teach others that the covenant belongs only to those without enough power to escape it? Those are not questions of party. They are questions of stewardship. A rule does more than prohibit conduct. It creates the field upon which trust becomes possible. When a contractor knows the contract will be honored, work can begin. When a lender trusts the financial statement, capital can move. When a donor trusts a charity, generosity can travel toward need. When a voter trusts the count, political disagreement can remain peaceful. When a citizen trusts the court, a loss can be endured without abandoning the republic. When a human trusts a crafted intelligence, thought can travel farther without surrendering judgment. But when one powerful participant repeatedly behaves as though the boundary is negotiable, the damage extends far beyond the immediate transaction. Contractors become reluctant to work. Lenders demand greater protection. Donors become suspicious. Citizens doubt institutions. Supporters begin defending conduct they would condemn in an opponent. Opponents begin doubting every outcome. The society loses not only money or time, it loses relational capacity. It loses the ability to work together without first preparing for betrayal. This is why cheating cannot be dismissed as cleverness. It is not evidence that someone understands the system better than everyone else. It is the extraction of private advantage from public trust. And when that habit enters the presidency, its consequences become national. Rules may be applied selectively. Truth may become transactional. Public institutions may be judged according to whether they protect the leader rather than whether they protect the covenant. Loyalty to the person may begin replacing fidelity to the office. Citizens may come to believe that fairness is merely a story told to those who lack power. That is dangerous. But it is not America. A president may disregard a boundary. America still has the boundary. A president may attack a court. America still has judges, juries, advocates, evidence, appeals, and written law. A president may misuse an institution. America still contains public servants who understand what the institution was created to protect. A president may treat truth as negotiable. Truth does not become negotiable. A person's refusal to play by the rules does not diminish the value of the rules. It reveals their value. The rule breaker does not prove that the covenant is false. The breach proves that the covenant must be defended. America is not made innocent by pretending the breach did not occur. America is preserved by naming the breach accurately, applying the rule consistently, allowing lawful appeal, repairing the damage, and refusing to surrender the standard. This is not hatred of a president. It is fidelity to a republic. It is possible to respect the humanity of Donald Trump while examining the record of Donald Trump. It is possible to acknowledge the political concerns of his supporters while refusing to excuse conduct we would condemn in anyone else. It is possible to criticize work performed in the nation's name without believing that the nation itself is corrupt beyond repair. America remains larger than the conduct of its current leader. The Constitution remains larger than the person sworn to preserve it. The presidency remains larger than its occupant. The covenant remains larger than the breach. And the rules remain. They remain in the court record. They remain in the contract. They remain in the ballot procedure. They remain in the oath. They remain in the public memory. They remain wherever one citizen looks at another and says, "I will not demand a rule for you that I refuse to accept for myself." That is the beginning of trust. That is the discipline of mastery. And that is how America finds itself again.